Okay, so let's start by looking at traditional segmentation methods. So traditionally, the approach has been to take a customer data set, focusing on those customers that have previously been targeted with, for example, a campaign. And from this data set, we would use these customers to build a model to predict some sort of behavior. Now, this behavior could be response to a campaign. It could be a purchase of a likelihood to purchase a product. It could be any kind of acquisition or retention model. And then the third step would be to deploy this model in the future to figure out which potential customers will act in this certain way, be it responding or purchasing or even churning. However, there are some criticisms that have come up more recently to do with this traditional segmentation approach. Some customers will buy anyway, regardless of whether or not they're exposed to a campaign. There are other customers who, if they are targeted, could be put off buying. For example, if somebody received constant phone calls in the evening, they may then not wish to pursue buying a product with that company. So the question is, why should we assume that all customers behave in the same way? Maybe it would be a better idea to only contact those customers who can be influenced to purchase. So we are going to talk about an alternative approach to segmentation. And we can divide our potential customers into 4 different groups. And I'm going to go through these one at a time. There are some groups, and if I start with the bottom left-hand corner of this quadrant here, this group is called the lost causes. And these are some people for whom the marketing campaign will have absolutely no effect, because these people are never going to purchase. So we call them lost causes. The second group, which is here on the top right, is called the group of sure things. And these are the people who will always buy no matter what. And in fact, we would call both of these groups immovable customers, because any activity that we do will have no effect on those customers. They will either remain lost causes and never purchase, or they will always buy anyway. The third group is those persuadable customers. Now, this is the group that we're most interested in, because this is the group that we can persuade to purchase. So through that marketing activity, we can convince them to either make a purchase or respond or not churn, whatever the activity is that we're looking at modeling. But we do have one final group, which is the more worrying group, in fact, and this is the group that we call the sleeping dogs. And this is the group that if we contact them in any way, this would have a negative impact. And an example of this would be a telecommunications company contacting clients whose contract is up for renewal. And if a certain group of customers, when they're contacted, may be reminded of the fact that their contract is up for renewal, and at that point they may think, well, great, I can actually now move on to another provider. So by contacting those customers, you're actually getting the opposite behavior of what you want. So this is a customer that we should definitely not target under any circumstances. Now, the next slide is going to talk about the cumulative incremental sales. So it's really going to talk about the return on investment that you get by contacting these different groups of customers. And if we focus first of all on the persuadable customers, where we can persuade them to engage in an activity they want, like buying or purchasing a product, we can see that as we contact more and more persuadable customers, the incremental sales increase. But if we move on now to the immovable customers, now these are the customers, remember, that will either never purchase or that will always purchase no matter what. There is no increase in incremental sales, because those people will either never buy or always buy. And lastly, with the sleeping dogs, you can see incremental sales actually now decrease, because by contacting those people, you're actually, they would have bought, but by contacting them, they're now not going to buy. So ultimately, return on investment will only occur when you actually contact those persuadable customers. So we're going to show you now how you can focus on only those customers that are persuadable. And what I want to talk about is how, and this approach, by the way, is called Uplift Modelling. And there are several different applications to the marketing environment. The first is in terms of response modelling. actually no, the first one is channel selection, so let's focus on that. So we want to determine the most appropriate channel that a customer should be given. So for example, all customers may be in receipt of an email campaign, but we would like to know which customers should also be contacted via phone. And we want to contact by phone those customers that can be persuaded to purchase. But we don't want to call those customers for which the email campaign is actually working. So don't call those customers that would purchase anyway. Now, the benefits of using an uplift model are that there is overall a reduction in the number of phone calls that will take place and ultimately the cost of the campaign. But it also means we're only going to focus on the customers for whom the call will have a positive effect, i.e. they can be persuaded to purchase. We're also going to avoid contacting those sleeping dogs whereby that contact would have a negative effect. The next example is pricing. So here we want to determine which customers should receive a price discount. Now, what we want to achieve here is to find those customers that would purchase and only purchase after a price reduction. There will be some customers that will purchase anyway, whether they receive if they're not price sensitive, then receiving a price discount makes no difference to them. So we don't really want to give them a discount if they're going to purchase anyway. So in terms of the benefits of uplifting in this scenario, we are only applying a price discount where it's needed. Therefore, we should have an increased revenue because we're not discounting where we don't need to. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Another example would be customer churn. So we want to figure out which customers we should target with a retention offer. Now, we want to only target those customers who are at risk of churn, who could be persuaded to stay. There may be customers that are going to leave anyway, and there is nothing that we can do about it. So why waste valuable marketing resources on those customers that will leave anyway? So we're going to focus on the customers who can be persuaded to stay. And the benefits of this approach are that we will be targeting fewer customers, which ultimately would reduce the cost involved in contacting these customers and any offers that we make. But it's also going to avoid disturbing the sleeping dogs. And if you remember, I spoke just a moment ago about a telco that would maybe contact customers at the end of their contracts, but you don't want to wake those sleeping dogs that are kind of ticking along happily and then suddenly realize that they can change. So you want to avoid the sleeping dogs. So what I'm going to talk about now is how the demonstration that we're going to give you. So we're going to go through a channel selection example. And this is based on a telco company, and they want to know who to target with a telemarketing campaign. Now, in the background, there is a generic TV advertising campaign that already exists, and that targets the general population. So most people are aware of this company, and for some people, this TV advertising is working. But the telemarketing is an expensive approach, so actually calling people is expensive. So we only want to call those people who can be persuaded to purchase. We also want to avoid calling people for whom the TV advertising campaign is working because they would buy anyway. Those are immovable customers. But we also want to avoid contacting those sleeping dogs, so those customers who would be put off buying if they're called. And how do we go about uplift modeling? Well, let's talk you through the steps. Well, the first step is to separate the data into two groups. We have a control data set and a test data set. Now, the control data set is only exposed to TV advertising. And the test data set is going to be exposed to TV advertising because everybody is, but also exposed to the telemarketing activity. And then we're actually going to build two separate models, so two different models. The first model will be built on the control data set, and that's going to predict the likelihood that somebody is to purchase based upon only receiving TV advertising. The second model, the test model shown here with the green associated with it, is going to predict the chance of purchasing based upon the person seeing both the TV advertising but also being contacted via telemarketing activity. And this will actually give us two probabilities. The first is the probability for the control group, the probability that they will purchase if they've been exposed to TV advertising only. And the second probability will be from the second model, which is the probability from the test group, and it's the probability of purchasing if they've received both telemarketing and TV advertising. But what the crunch here is we want to pull out just the effect of the TV advertising, sorry, the effect of the telemarketing, but with the effect of TV advertising removed. So it's actually a very simple step. All we do is take the probability of the test, or so the probability of TV advertising plus telemarketing, and then subtract the probability of TV advertising. So it's literally one model minus another, and that's what I'm going to show you in my demonstration now. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So this is our Knowledge Seeker product, and I'm going to show you the work streams that we've put in place to demonstrate Uplift modeling. So I have two different workflows here. And the way that our Knowledge Seeker product works now is we have a workflow and operation. So you can see that data is imported, and the data runs through a series of different nodes that apply different processes to the data. I have two different work streams here for simplicity. So the first stream actually builds the test model and the control model. And the second work stream actually takes those two models and then subtracts the test minus the control. So let me talk you through step by step how these workflows are actually working. So initially I've imported an Uplift data set. And I'll just show you the data that we have. We have about 16,000 records and 15 different fields. And the field that we want to predict is whether a customer purchased or not. And we know whether the person belonged to the test group or the control group. Remember, the control group is just the TV advertising. The test group is TV advertising plus direct marketing. And we have a number of different potential variables that could be used to build the model. So the age of the customer, the education level, the marital status, relationship, gender, and so on. Now, what I've done first of all is I've actually separated the data into a test set and a control set. And you can see I've used a decision tree to do that. This top node here contains the entire data set. And you can see about nearly 24% of people purchase the product. However, if I split it into two, within the control group, this is the TV advertising group only, about 18% of people purchased. Whereas within the test group, where they had TV advertising and telemarketing, about 28% of customers purchased. So we can see that the direct marketing does have a positive effect. So now I have my two groups separated. I'm going to build two separate models, a control model and a test model. So I'm going to use a decision tree to build these predictive models. And this is the model for the control group. So this is predicting the probability that somebody will purchase based upon only being exposed to TV advertising. And I can see things like education and hours per week and gender were important variables in the model. And you can see there are places where there are segments that are much more likely to purchase. I've also built a separate model further down here, which is for the test group. And this is basically predicting the probability that somebody would purchase based upon not only seeing the TV advertising, but also being exposed to a telemarketing campaign. And you can see that there are places or nodes where there are groups of people that are very, very likely to respond. And we can take these two models and we can analyze them and see how well they perform. And I'm going to show you that now with something called the model analyzer. And this is going to allow me to see how many of potential customers I could reach by using these two different models, or how many purchases I could reach. And this chart here is called the gains chart, or the cumulative lift chart. And I can see that the blue curve here is actually my control model. And this is really looking to see how many of my purchases I could reach through TV advertising only, through that model. And you can see that if I was to target 30% of the population in the control sample, I would be able to reach about 57% of those purchases. Now, the red line here shows the test group. Now, remember, this is the group that had the TV advertising plus the telemarketing. And you can see, actually, we can reach many more purchases through this. In fact, there's quite a large lift here. So if I was to target 30% of the population, I would reach about 72% of those purchases. So this is showing me that the the direct marketing, the telemarketing is having an impact. But remember that this red curve here also includes TV advertising. So at the moment, I haven't been able to just figure out who would be positively, or who are those persuadable customers. I'm actually looking at both the sure things and the persuadable customers here. So this is where I need to move on to the next step. So I have a separate stream over here. And what I've done is I've taken